Hi everyone, welcome to Module 12. This module is about giving effective feedback to group members. Feedback is information about the quality or quantity of the group's work, an assessment of how effective the group is at accomplishing its task, or an individual evaluation of somebody's performance in the group. So feedback can be negative or positive. It can be directed to individuals or directed to the group as a whole, right? Most of us know that it's useful to give and receive feedback because it helps us understand what's going well, what we need to improve. But sometimes feedback can feel like a personal attack and it can lead to conflict. So it's hard to hear critiques of our own actions, and it can be difficult to give feedback to other people in a way that's helpful and both addresses the behavior and preserves relationships. So information in this module is really helpful, both for your work in this class and for your participation in other groups and sort of organizational settings where you need to give feedback in your parts of your life. So in this brief video, I'm going to give an overview of the material in the modules and highlight one key concept that I think is important and talk you through the assignments, which are a little bit different this week. Okay, so first, the reading from this week is a chapter from an earlier version of the textbook that was specifically about feedback. I like this chapter, so I've included it here in our course, and I've provided a PDF for you on Blackboard in the module. The chapter discusses what feedback is, how to craft and deliver effective feedback, why it's beneficial for a group to have an established system for giving and receiving feedback, and so on. In addition to the reading, there are a couple of videos about how to give feedback, and you'll be asked to engage with the reading and these videos in your personal journal. So one of the key ideas that I think is useful and sometimes kind of tricky for students is the distinction between three different types of feedback. So the first type is descriptive, and this is when you just simply describe what you see about somebody's behavior. An example of descriptive feedback would be, I notice that we never start our meetings on time. We're always 10 or 15 minutes late. Or I notice that we always start our meetings on time, right? On the individual level, it could be something like, Joanne, you tend to be quiet in the group and not say much during our meetings. So these descriptive feedback can feel like maybe it isn't really feedback in the way that we think about it because there's no explicit evaluation. But these kinds of descriptions can be the beginning of a longer conversation, which might get into more evaluation or discussion what could be do differently, what could be done differently. But this initial piece of feedback is just describing. It's useful as a way to bring something to the group's attention that you think is going on is important. For example, with Joanne, it might be that she feels like she can't figure out when to jump into the conversation and would really like to have people listen to her ideas. Maybe she's not slacking, maybe she's more introverted and learns best by listening and thinking before she speaks. So if you're in a group with Joanne and you make this observation about her behavior in a way that's non-judgmental, it can be an invitation for her to participate more and an indication to other group members that she might need some time and some space, right? So that's just descriptive. No evaluation, no statement of what needs to happen differently, just describing what you see. The second type is evaluative, and this is when you describe a behavior and evaluate it as either positive or negative. So one example of evaluative feedback could be something like, Chris, you contribute a lot of ideas to our group, but sometimes there isn't time for anyone else to talk, which isn't good for our group climate. So here you're describing Chris's behavior and evaluating it as having a negative impact on the group members. The feedback is negative because it's a critique of Chris's behavior, but it's not presented as a personal attack. An evaluative feedback can also be positive. You could say something like, our team is doing a great job at getting things turned in on time and getting good grades on our assignments. The third type is prescriptive. That's number 3. So there's descriptive, evaluative, and prescriptive, which is when you add in some sort of comment about what you think ought to happen differently. And this is kind of what we classically think of as feedback, but you have to be careful with it because if you just jump right in with prescriptive, sometimes people get defensive about it, right? Because you're just saying, this is what I think ought to happen instead. So being really careful about prescriptive feedback is important. So let's go back to our example of Chris. You could offer prescriptive feedback to the group by saying something like, it seems like we don't do a good job of making sure everyone has equal say in the group. I think we should try going around the circle and giving each person a chance to talk before we make a decision. So this feedback is evaluating behavior as negative, and this time you're targeting it to the group rather than to Chris as an individual. And you're also adding in a suggestion for improvement, and that suggestion is what makes it prescriptive, because you're prescribing some sort of course of action. So think about these 3 different types of feedback and how you could use them in your group for this class and also in other groups that you're a part of. They're all valid types of feedback, but they're appropriate in different kinds of situations and with different kinds of people. Okay, so one big change for us this week is there's no case assigned. There's no case reading, and we're not doing a case discussion. Instead, your assignment is to give some feedback to your group. You'll use the discussion board that's specific to your group, so not the whole class, but just the one that's in your group, kind of like you used for your group guidelines. I've created a forum in your group discussion board called Group Feedback for Module 12, and you should use that space to post your feedback. Be sure to follow the instructions. You need to have 2 pieces of feedback, one to the group as a whole, one to an individual member of your group, and you should also respond to 2 pieces. Now, this can be descriptive, evaluative, prescriptive. It can be positive or negative, right? There's different sort of things you can do there. The due date for this is the end of the week, but I recommend you make your initial posts sort of earlier so people have time to look and respond and we don't all wait to the last minute, because that makes it really stressful and challenging. Finally, your group milestone this week is to analyze 4 possible solutions using the criteria you generated earlier. So if you haven't already, be sure to go back and look at my feedback on the criteria and make revisions accordingly. It's important that all your criteria are things you can apply to any possible solution, and the criteria should help you assess the strengths and weaknesses of each of those solutions so you can choose the best one. I'll also give you grade and feedback on your possible solutions early so you can take that into account before you get too far into your analysis. Okay, make sense? That's it for now. Thanks for the good work, and I hope you enjoy the material here. Let me know if you have questions about anything in this module. I'm always happy to talk to you.